never heard music in my life. When I was 14, I watched my mom take a hammer to my phone because the ringtone had played for half a second before I could silence it, and she said even that tiny melody was enough poison to rot our brains forever. My parents believed all music was mind control created by corporations to make people weak and stupid. Every melody, every rhythm, every note was designed to turn your brain to mush. We lived in a house where the TV was always muted. Computers had their speakers ripped out, and even the microwave had tape over the beep button. Mom said people who listened to music became zombies who couldn't think for themselves. The hammer came down again and the screen cracked. "Half a second, Lily," she said, breathing hard. "Half a second of that poison. Do you want to end up brain dead?" According to them, everyone who listened to music eventually lost the ability to think clearly. That's why the world was so messed up. Because everyone was walking around with music-rotted brains. Going anywhere meant stuffing industrial earplugs deep until it hurt. Mom checked each of us before we left the house, yanking on the orange foam to make sure they were seated right. The grocery store killed me because I knew there was music playing overhead, but the earplugs blocked it completely. Back then, I still believed my parents. But some part of me was desperately curious about what we were being protected from. I'd catch myself straining to hear something, anything, through the foam. Dad had a whole philosophy about it. He'd give us lectures during silent dinners about how humans were meant to live in natural quiet, how music was invented to make people docile and controllable. He'd point at people on the muted TV and explain how you could tell they listened to music by how empty their eyes looked. My brothers believed every word. When I was 14, I accidentally heard music at school when someone's headphones came unplugged. Just 5 seconds of something with drums and a woman singing before the kids scrambled to stop it. But those 5 seconds were the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. My heart raced and my skin tingled, and I finally understood what we'd been denied. I also understood why my parents feared it so much. Not because it was poison, but because it made you feel things they couldn't control. I became obsessed with finding ways to hear more. I'd volunteer to return library books during lunch so I could walk past the band room. I'd dawdle in store bathrooms where the earplugs couldn't block everything. Once I stood outside a church during a wedding and heard organ music so powerful I cried. Mom found me there and dragged me home by my hair. After that, they homeschooled me. My days were silent except for Dad's lectures and the scratch of pencils, but I'd started humming without realizing it. Just tiny melodic patterns under my breath. My brother Miles caught me and said he'd tell unless I gave him my desserts for a month. I did it because the humming was the only thing keeping me sane. My youngest brother Micah started having nightmares about music. He'd wake up screaming that songs were chasing him, that drums were beating inside his head. Mom praised him for being so vigilant against the poison even in his sleep. She didn't see what I saw. A 7-year-old so terrified of something beautiful that his own brain was torturing him with it. When I was 16, our situation got worse. A new family moved in next door with teenage kids who played instruments. Even through our soundproofed walls, you could feel the bass vibrations. Mom went over there daily to beg them to stop destroying our minds. Dad started looking at houses in rural areas with no neighbors for miles. My brothers wore earplugs constantly now, even eating with them in. One afternoon while everyone was out, I did something stupid. I found Dad's hidden cash stash and bought a tiny MP3 player from a kid at the library. I hid in the basement storage room, heart pounding, and put in the earbuds. The first song was just a guitar and a man's voice, but it felt like my entire body was waking up from a coma. I listened to 10 songs in a row, each one making me feel more human than I'd felt in years. Miles found me down there, eyes wide with horror. "You're listening to it," he whispered. "You're letting it eat your brain." He looked at me like I was already dead. I tried to explain that it wasn't poison, that it was beautiful, but he was already backing away. "I have to tell them," he said. "They need to know you're infected." I grabbed his arm and begged him not to, but he twisted away and ran upstairs screaming for Mom. I heard their footsteps coming and knew it was over. There was no hiding what I'd done. I'd chosen music over my family's sickness, and now I'd pay whatever price they decided. As the basement door flew open and I saw their faces twisted with rage and fear, I put the earbuds back in and turned the volume up. If I was going down, at least I'd go down listening to something beautiful. Mom's hand rips the earbuds out so hard the cord cuts into my neck. Dad grabs the MP3 player and throws it against the concrete floor, then stomps on it 3 times until plastic shards scatter across the storage room. Mom has both hands on my shoulders now, shaking me so my head snaps back and forth. Her face is right in mine and she's screaming about poison and infection, and how could I do this to myself? Dad kicks the broken pieces of the MP3 player toward the wall, and I watch them skitter across the floor, taking with them the only music I'd ever really owned. Miles stands in the doorway with his mouth open, looking both scared of what I've done and pleased that he caught me. I can still hear the last song playing in my head, the guitar and the woman's voice, and I hold onto it as tight as I can while Mom keeps shaking me. Dad yanks me up by my arm and Mom grabs the other one and they drag me toward the stairs. My feet barely touch the steps as they haul me up and Miles has to jump out of the way when we reach the top. They pull me down the hallway to my bedroom and shove me inside hard enough that I stumble and hit my knee on the bed frame. Dad points at me and his hand is shaking. Mom slams the door and I hear the lock click from outside. the one they installed last year that only opens from the hallway. I sit on my bed and touch my neck where the cord left a mark. The house is quiet for maybe 30 seconds. Then I hear their voices start up in the hallway right outside my door. They're trying to whisper, but Mom keeps getting louder and I catch words through the wood. Deprogramming, intervention. Before it's too late. Dad says something about neural damage and Mom responds with infected, and I press my hands over my ears even though I can still hear them. They argue for what feels like an hour, their voices rising and falling, Mom's getting sharp and Dad's staying low and controlled. I lie back on my bed and stare at the ceiling and feel strangely calm about everything. I listen to music, real actual music, and they can't take that away no matter what they do to me now. The melody plays in my head on repeat, and I mouth the words I remember, and the calm feeling stays even when I hear Mom crying in the hallway. The lock clicks and Dad comes in carrying his big notebook, the one where he keeps all his theories. He sits in my desk chair and makes me sit up straight on the bed facing him. For the next 4 hours, he lectures me about music and brain damage and corporate mind control. He flips through pages of diagrams he's drawn showing normal brains as organized circles and music-damaged brains as tangled messes of lines. He explains how sound waves at certain frequencies literally rewire neural pathways and destroy critical thinking abilities. He shows me charts about dopamine manipulation and addiction cycles. He talks about how corporations use music to make people docile and easy to control. How every song is carefully designed to shut down the logical parts of your brain. I nod when he pauses and say, I understand when he asks if I'm following. Inside my head, I'm replaying those 10 songs and knowing everything he's saying is complete nonsense. His diagrams are just circles and scribbles, his theories are paranoid fantasies, and the music I heard was beautiful, not poisonous. But I keep nodding and I write down the key points he tells me to write down, and I watch the light outside my window fade from afternoon to evening while he keeps talking. When he finally leaves, my hand is cramped from writing and my head hurts from holding two opposite truths at the same time. Mom brings dinner on a tray an hour later. She sets it on my desk without looking at me. Like if she makes eye contact, she'll see that I'm already gone, already lost to the poison. The food is the same as always, but she's cut everything into small pieces like I'm 5 years old. She walks around my room picking up my books from the shelf and stacking them by the door. My journal goes on top of the stack, then my sketch pad, then the 3 novels I was reading. She takes the poster off my wall, the one of mountains I've never seen, and rolls it up tight. When she's done, my room looks empty and sad, just the bed and desk and bare walls. She tells me without looking at me that distractions will only make the deprogramming harder, that I need to focus on cleansing my mind. Then she picks up the stack and leaves, locking the door behind her. I eat the dinner slowly, chewing each small piece and thinking about how they really believe this, how they've built their whole lives around being afraid of something that made me feel more alive than anything else ever has. After I finish eating, I lie on my bed with nothing to do except replay those 10 songs and Dad's nonsense diagrams, and I realize the songs are stronger, clearer, more real than anything he tried to teach me. Morning comes and I hear the lock click. Mom and Dad stand in my doorway and announce the new rules. I'm not allowed downstairs unless one of them is with me. Bathroom breaks have to be supervised, which means knocking and waiting for Mom to come unlock the door and stand outside while I'm in there. They're installing a better lock on my bedroom door, one that takes a key instead of just sliding. Dad lists each rule in his calm lecture voice while Mom nods along, her arms crossed tight over her chest. Miles is behind them in the hallway looking uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Micah pushes past Miles to see what's happening and his eyes are huge and worried. He asks if I'm going to die from the music poison, his voice small and scared. Mom tells him no, that they caught it early enough, but he needs to stay away from me until I'm better. Micah backs away and I see him looking at me like I'm already a different person, someone dangerous. Miles won't meet my eyes at all. Dad finishes explaining the rules and they leave and I hear them working on the door from outside, the sound of a drill and metal scraping. When they test the new lock, it makes a solid click that sounds more final than the old one. I sit on my empty bed in my empty room and count the hours until they bring lunch. The next 3 days blur together into one long stretch of silence and isolation. Dad comes in twice a day for lectures, showing me the same diagrams over and over, explaining the same theories about neural damage and corporate control. Mom brings meals on trays 3 times a day and never speaks, just sets the food down and leaves. They make me write essays about the dangers of music, about how corporations use it for mind control, about why families need to protect themselves from sonic pollution. I fill pages with exactly what they want to hear, writing about corrupted brainwaves and the importance of silence. My hand cramps from holding the pen, and my eyes hurt from staring at blank paper trying to come up with new ways to say the same lies. But while I write their propaganda, my brain plays those 10 songs on an endless loop. I remember every note of the guitar, every word the woman sang, every beat of the drums. The music is clearer in my memory than Dad's face during his lectures. At night, I lie awake humming the melodies so quietly even I can barely hear them, and the songs are the only thing keeping me from screaming at the walls. On the 3rd day, I start to feel separate from my body, like I'm watching myself from somewhere else, watching this girl write essays and nod along and pretend to believe things she knows are insane. On the fourth day, I wake up to shouting outside. I get up and look through my window, careful to stand to the side so no one sees me. Mom is in the neighbor's front yard, her arms waving around as she yells at a woman about my mom's age. The woman has dark hair pulled back and she's wearing jeans and a sweater and she looks confused and concerned. Mom is yelling about noise pollution and deliberately poisoning our family and how they need to stop their evil music right now. The woman tries to say something, but Mom talks over her, getting louder and more frantic. She's pointing at our house and then at the neighbor's house and her face is red. The woman takes a step back and says something calm, probably trying to settle Mom down, but it just makes Mom angrier. A teenage boy comes out onto the neighbor's porch, maybe 16 or 17, and the woman turns to him and says something. He goes back inside. Mom keeps yelling for another minute, then storms back across the yard to our house. The neighbor woman stands there watching her go, then looks up at the houses like she's trying to figure something out. Her face is worried in a way that makes me think she knows something is very wrong here. She goes back inside and I stay at the window wondering what she's thinking, whether she believes any of Mom's crazy accusations. That evening I'm lying on my bed when I feel it, a low vibration coming through the wall. It's so faint I almost miss it, but when I press my hand flat against the wall I can feel it clearly. Bass, deep and rhythmic, coming from the neighbor's house. They must be practicing, the teenage boy and whoever else plays instruments over there. I get up and press both hands against the wall, then my cheek, trying to feel as much of the vibration as possible. It's not the same as hearing music, but it's close. It's something. The tremors pulse through the wall into my palms, and I can almost imagine the actual sounds, the drums or bass guitar or whatever is making these waves. This is the closest I can get to music now, and I stand there soaking it in. These faint tremors that connect me to something real and beautiful happening just on the other side of this wall. The vibrations continue for maybe 20 minutes, sometimes stronger, sometimes barely there. I stay pressed against the wall the whole time, my eyes closed, trying to pull the music through the plaster and wood through pure wanting. The door lock clicks and I spin around. Mom is standing there staring at me with my hands still on the wall. She crosses the room in 3 steps and slaps my hands away hard enough to sting. Her breathing is fast and her eyes look wild, darting between me and the wall like the music might leak through and grab her too. She leaves and comes back 5 minutes later with thick foam padding, the kind Dad used to soundproof parts of the house. She tears off strips of tape and starts covering the section of wall where I was standing, pressing the foam down hard and smoothing it flat. She does 3 layers, overlapping them so there's no gap. When she's done, she presses her own hand against it to test and seems satisfied that the vibrations are blocked. She's breathing hard and her hands are shaking, and I realize she's not angry. Not really. She's scared. She's terrified of losing control over me, of the music getting in despite all their locks and rules and lectures. She looks at me, and I see fear in her eyes. Pure fear and something else. Maybe the beginning of understanding that fear isn't the same thing as protection. She leaves without saying anything and locks the door behind her. That night at dinner, Dad makes an announcement. We're all sitting at the table, me with a parent on each side like I might run, Miles across from me looking at his plate, Micah at the end picking at his food. Dad says he found a property online, a house on 20 acres at least an hour from the nearest town. No neighbors for Miles, completely isolated, perfect for protecting us from the infected zone we're living in now. He says we're moving there within 2 weeks, that he's already put down a deposit and started packing arrangements. Mom nods along, relieved, like this move will solve everything. Miles looks up briefly and I see something in his face. Maybe doubt, maybe just tiredness, but he doesn't say anything. Micah asks if there will be other kids there and Dad says no. That's the whole point. We'll be safe from outside influences. I sit there with food I can't eat and watch my family plan my complete isolation. 2 weeks. 14 days before they take me somewhere I'll never hear music again. Never see another person my age. Never have any chance of escape. The calm I felt in the basement is completely gone now, replaced by something sharp and desperate. I have 14 days to figure out what I'm going to do, because I know with absolute certainty that I can't let them take me to that rural prison. I look at each of their faces. Mom's relieved, Dad's satisfied, Miles is uncertain, Micah's confused, and I know that whatever I do, I'm going to have to do it alone. That night, I wait until I hear Dad snoring through the wall and then get up to test my bedroom window. I push on the frame and it doesn't budge at all, and when I run my fingers along the edges, I can feel where thick paint has sealed it completely shut. I try the other window and it's the same thing. Both of them painted closed probably years ago when they first started worrying about me escaping. But when I examine the door, I find something useful. The lock is just a basic slide bolt on the outside, the kind you can buy at any hardware store, and the gap between the door and frame is wide enough that I might be able to slip something thin through to push it open. I test it carefully with a bookmark and feel the bolt move slightly, and I know this is my way out if I need it. The next morning, Mom takes her usual shower at exactly 7:30, and I listen for the water to start running. I slip downstairs as quietly as possible and head straight for the kitchen, my heart beating so hard I can feel it in my throat. Dad's car keys are hanging on their hook by the garage door where they always are, and I grab them and shove them deep into a box of bran cereal in the very back of the pantry behind the canned goods. I'm back upstairs and in my room before the shower turns off, and I sit on my bed trying to calm my breathing. An hour later, I hear Dad getting ready to leave, and then his voice gets loud and confused. He's looking for his keys and can't find them. And within minutes, he's tearing through the house, opening drawers and checking coat pockets, and getting more and more worked up. Mom joins in the search, and I hear them going through every room, and then Dad's voice gets sharp and accusing. He calls for Miles, and I hear my brother come downstairs, and Dad demands to know if this is some kind of joke. Miles sounds genuinely confused and denies taking anything, but Dad doesn't believe him and keeps pushing. They argue back and forth while Mom keeps searching, and I stay in my room listening to the chaos I created. Finally, Dad gives up and says they'll have to reschedule the appointment to sign the property papers, and I feel this little surge of power knowing I made that happen. 3 days pass, and I spend most of my time at my window watching the house next door. I start noticing patterns in how the family moves around. A teenage boy who looks about my age leaves through the front door every morning at 7:30 with a backpack, and he comes home around 3 in the afternoon. In the late afternoon, I can see him through his window sometimes, and I think he's playing some kind of instrument because I can feel those bass vibrations again. One day he's in his yard, and he looks up at my window, and I duck back fast, but not before I see him raise his hand like he might be waving. I don't know if he actually saw me or not, but my hands are shaking anyway. Mom finds the keys on the 3rd day, and she's absolutely furious when she discovers them in the cereal box. She confronts Dad about being so careless and misplacing important things, and he swears up and down that he didn't put them there. They argue about it for an hour, and I can hear the stress in both their voices, but the delay worked exactly like I hoped. I've been using these 3 days to think through everything, weighing my options and trying to figure out the best choice. If I run, I have no money, no car, nowhere to go, and they'll probably find me within hours. But if I let them take me to that rural property, I'll be trapped forever with no way to contact anyone or get help. Neither option is good, but at least running gives me a chance. During one of Dad's lectures that afternoon, I do something I haven't done in weeks. I actually ask him a question about his theories, and his whole face changes like he's surprised and pleased. I ask what happens to people who've been exposed to music, whether there's any way to fix the damage, and he launches into this long explanation about recovery periods and neural cleansing. He talks about how the brain can heal itself if you remove all musical influence and follow strict protocols, and he seems genuinely happy that I'm engaging with his ideas. I nod along and ask follow-up questions while my real thoughts are racing. I'm calculating how much he wants to believe I can be saved, how much he needs to think his system works, and I realize I can use that. If I act like I'm trying to recover, he might give me slightly more freedom. That night, after everyone goes to sleep, I tear a piece of paper from an old notebook I'd hidden under my mattress. I write carefully in small letters so the whole message fits on one piece. I need help. They're moving me away. I'm not allowed to leave. I fold it as small as I can and tuck it in my pocket, and my heart won't stop pounding because I know how risky this is. If my parents find it, I don't know what they'll do. But I'm out of options and out of time. On trash day, I do something that shocks everyone. I volunteer to take out the garbage bags, and Mom actually stops what she's doing and stares at me. She looks suspicious, but I keep my face neutral and helpful, and finally she agrees. Dad watches from the kitchen window as I carry the bags to the curb, and I move slowly and carefully so I don't seem like I'm rushing. The neighbor's recycling bin is right next to their driveway, and I walk past it on my way back to the house. I slip the folded note under some newspapers in the bin as fast as I can, praying nobody saw me and praying even harder that someone actually finds it. 2 whole days go by with nothing, and I start thinking the note got thrown away or buried under other recycling. Maybe the neighbor boy never even looks in that bin, or maybe he found it and decided I'm crazy and ignored it. I spend hours at my window watching their house and seeing nothing unusual, and I'm starting to lose hope. Then on the 3rd day, I'm looking out, and the teenage boy is standing in his yard staring directly at my window. He's holding a small whiteboard, and he's written something on it in black marker. I saw your note. My hands start shaking. So hard I have to press them against the glass to steady them. I give him a thumbs up and he nods, then erases what he wrote and writes something else. What do you need? I mouth the word help as clearly as I can, and then I point to my parents' car in the driveway, trying to make him understand that they're planning to take me away soon. He watches me carefully, and then nods again, this time looking serious and determined, like he understands exactly what I'm trying to say. Over the next 3 days, Andre shows up in his yard at different times with the whiteboard. He writes simple questions I can answer with thumbs up or thumbs down. Are you allowed to leave the house? Thumbs down. Are your parents planning something? Thumbs up. Soon? Thumbs up. He erases and writes more. Do they hurt you? I hesitate but give a thumbs up and his face goes hard. Are they moving away with you? Thumbs up. He writes one more thing. We're going to help you. I press my hand against the glass, and he does the same from his yard, and for the first time in weeks, I feel like maybe I'm not completely alone in this. On the 4th day, Mom catches me standing by the window during my assigned reading time. She doesn't say anything, just stares at me with this look that makes my stomach drop. That afternoon, I hear drilling and hammering, and when I come out for dinner, there's a curtain rod installed above my window with thick blackout curtains. Mom pulls them closed, and they block out all the light. She tells me the curtains stay closed at all times because the outside world is too distracting from my recovery, and I know she means Andre. That night, after everyone goes to sleep, I carefully pull the curtain back just an inch to see if Andre left any messages. There's nothing on the whiteboard, but I see a light flick on and off in his window, like he's checking if I can still see out. I flick my desk lamp twice in response, and the light in his window flicks 3 times. It's not much, but it's something. I have to be so careful now because Mom checks on me randomly throughout the day, pulling the curtain back to make sure it stayed closed. I start sabotaging the move preparations in small ways. I knock over a box of dishes while carrying it to the garage, and 3 plates smash. Mom yells, but I apologize and act clumsy. I lose the folder with important documents about the new house, and Dad spends 2 hours searching before finding it in the recycling bin. I tell him I must have thrown it away by accident while cleaning. Listen to 90 Seconds and rate me 5 stars on Spotify. Doing a giveaway for people who did this and show proof on my Instagram. There will be 4 winners, and you get to choose between a Spotify or Amazon gift card. When Mom asks me to pack my clothes, I fold everything wrong and mix summer and winter items until she gets frustrated and does it herself. Dad's irritation grows with each mistake, but Mom interprets everything as me being confused and damaged by the music exposure. She tells Dad I'm probably having trouble with basic tasks, because my brain is still recovering, and I have to hide my relief that my act is working. One morning, I wake up to the sound of a drill outside my door. I sit up, and Dad pushes the door open, holding a shiny new deadbolt. He says it's for my own protection so I don't wander during the night, but I can see what it really is. He's turning my bedroom into a cell. He installs it while I watch. The deadbolt facing outward so only someone in the hallway can open it. He tests it 3 times, sliding the bolt back and forth, and tells me this is temporary, until we get to the new house where I'll have more freedom. I don't believe him. That night after he locks me in, I lie awake thinking about being transported like a prisoner to some isolated property where nobody will ever find me. I need to document what's happening in case I ever get a chance to tell someone. I tear pages from the back of an old notebook I'd hidden under my mattress months ago. I write everything down in small letters so it fits on the scraps. May 3rd, Dad installed deadbolt on outside of door. Says it's to keep me from wandering. May 4th, Mom checks on me every hour. Not allowed to use bathroom without permission. May 5th, Dad lectured for 3 hours about music damage. Mom took away my books. I hide the papers inside my pillowcase where they can't be seen unless someone tears the pillow apart. Every day I add more notes about the locks, the isolation, the monitoring, the lectures about my poisoned brain. If I ever get out of here, I want to have specific details and dates, so people will believe me. On the 6th day, someone knocks on the front door and I hear Mom answer. I crack my bedroom door open just enough to listen. A woman's voice asks to borrow a large pot for cooking, and Mom sounds annoyed but agrees. I peek through the gap in my doorway and see it's Andre's mom, Sylvia, standing in the entryway. Her eyes scan the living room, and I watch them widen as she takes in the foam padding on the walls, the tape over the doorbell button, the unplugged TV with its speakers ripped out. Mom practically throws the pot at her and starts closing the door, but Sylvia thanks her slowly, still looking around. I know she saw enough to raise serious questions about what kind of house this is. The next morning, Dad unlocks my door to bring breakfast, and I make sure my sleeves are pushed up, so he can see the bruises on my arms. They're from 2 days ago when Mom grabbed me hard during a lecture about how music was rotting my ability to think clearly. The marks are dark purple and finger-shaped. Dad sees them but doesn't react, just sets the tray down and leaves. I position myself by the window gap in the curtains where I can see Sylvia's yard. She's outside watering plants, and I wait until she glances toward our house. When she does, I mouth the words, "Help me," as clearly as I can. Her face changes immediately, going from curious to seriously concerned. She sets down the watering can and stares at my window for a long moment before going inside. That afternoon, I hear her voice in the yard talking on the phone. I can't make out the actual words through the glass and curtains, but her tone sounds official and worried. She keeps looking at our house while she talks, and I press my face close to the curtain gap to watch. She's pacing and gesturing with her free hand like she's explaining something important to whoever is on the other end. I let myself hope that maybe she's calling someone who can actually do something to help me. That night, Mom comes into my room without knocking and starts tearing through my things. She pulls out drawers, dumps my clothes on the floor, strips my bed. When she finds the scraps of paper hidden in my pillowcase, her face goes white and then red. She reads through them fast, her hands shaking, and then she rips them into tiny pieces. Her reaction is worse than when she found the MP3 player. She screams that I'm being dramatic and ungrateful, that I'm making up stories to hurt them when all they've ever done is try to save me from myself. She throws the torn paper at me, and it flutters down like snow. She tells me I'm sick and twisted for documenting their love and protection as if it's something wrong. After she leaves, I pick up as many pieces as I can, but most are too small to read anymore. I've lost my evidence, but the act of keeping it taught me something. I need to be ready to leave at any moment because this situation is only getting worse. I start gathering essentials and hiding them where Mom won't think to look. I take my winter jacket and fold it flat under my mattress. I find some birthday money I'd saved, maybe $30, and tape it inside an old book cover. I take the one photo I have of Micah from before the nightmares started and slip it between the pages of a textbook. I put everything into a plastic grocery bag and hide it in the back corner of my closet behind a box of old shoes. I don't have a solid plan yet, but I know I need to be ready to grab that bag and run if an opportunity comes, because staying here until they move me to the middle of nowhere isn't an option anymore. The next afternoon, I'm watching through the curtain gap when I see Andre in his yard tossing a tennis ball against the fence like he's bored. He glances at our house and I realize he's waiting for me to notice. He throws the ball over the fence into our yard, and then makes a big show of looking around like he's trying to figure out where it went. I watch him walk along his side of the fence until he's at the back corner, where the wood panels don't quite meet the ground. He bends down like he's looking for the ball and his hand disappears under the fence for just a second. Then he stands up, waves at his mom who's on their porch, and goes inside. I wait 10 minutes to make sure no one in my house is paying attention. Mom is in the kitchen and Dad is in his office and my brothers are doing schoolwork at the dining table. I slip downstairs as quietly as possible and go out the back door. The tennis ball is sitting in the grass near the fence and I pick it up and carry it to the corner. There's a folded piece of paper wedged under the fence board, and I grab it fast and shove it in my pocket. I toss the ball back over and go inside before anyone notices I left. In my room with the door closed, I unfold the paper and my hands shake as I read. Andre's phone number is at the top, and below it he's written that his mom called a family services hotline to ask what they should do about a neighbor kid who seems to be in trouble. The person on the phone told them to document everything they see and hear, and to call if there's ever immediate danger. The note says they're keeping a log of all the times my mom yells at their house, and the times they see me at the window looking scared. He writes that I should try to get outside if possible, so they can witness my parents' behavior directly. The last line says to destroy the note after reading it. I read it 3 more times and then tear it into tiny pieces and flush them down the toilet. Knowing someone is actually paying attention and trying to help makes me feel less alone, but also more scared because now things might actually change, and I don't know if that's better or worse. The next morning at breakfast, I do something I never do. I ask Mom if I can help with yard work because the grass is getting long and the garden needs attention. She stops with her coffee cup halfway to her mouth and stares at me. Dad looks up from his silent newspaper and studies my face like he's trying to figure out what I'm really asking. Mom asks why I suddenly care about the yard, and I say, I've been inside so much lately that some fresh air would be nice. It's not a lie exactly. Dad says he'll supervise and Mom agrees after a long pause. We go outside an hour later and Dad hands me the weeding tools and points at the garden bed that runs along the side of the house near the fence. I kneel down and start pulling weeds while Dad stands 10 feet away with his arms crossed watching me. I work slowly and make my way closer to the fence. I can hear Andre's voice in his yard talking to his mom, and I know they're both out there. I'm maybe 3 feet from the fence when I reach for a weed near the property line. Dad's hand clamps down on my shoulder hard and he yanks me backward. I stumble and almost fall, and he grabs my arm and shoves me toward the house. His grip is tight enough to hurt, and I look back and see Andre and Sylvia standing on their porch watching everything. Sylvia has her phone in her hand, and the way she's holding it, I realize she's recording. Dad sees it too, and his face goes red. He yells at them that they're invading our privacy, and they have no right to film us on our own property. Sylvia doesn't look scared at all. She says in this calm voice that she already called the police and they're on their way to do a welfare check. Dad's hand drops from my arm and he tells me to get inside now. I walk to the back door and glance over my shoulder, and Sylvia gives me this tiny nod like she's saying it's going to be okay. Inside, Dad paces in the kitchen and Mom comes down asking what's wrong. He tells her the neighbors called the cops and they need to be ready to handle this properly. Mom's face goes through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds and then settles on this fake calm. She tells me to go upstairs and stay in my room until they call for me. I sit on my bed and hear a car pull up outside 20 minutes later. Voices at the front door. Mom's laugh that sounds totally fake. Dad using his reasonable voice. They call me down and I come downstairs to find 2 police officers in our living room. Mom and Dad are all smiles now, and they're explaining how I'm a troubled teen who's been acting out lately, and they're so sorry if I worried the neighbors. One officer is a woman with dark hair pulled back and she asks if she can talk to me. Dad says of course and gestures for me to sit in the armchair. The officers stay standing and my parents stay standing, and I'm the only one sitting, which makes me feel small and trapped. The woman officer asks if I'm being harmed, and I look at her face and then at my parents' faces, and I see Dad's jaw tight and Mom's hands clenched. I say no, I'm fine, everything is fine. She asks if I feel safe here, and I nod. The male officer asks about the homeschooling, and Dad jumps in with information about our curriculum and documentation. They seem satisfied enough after a few more questions. Before they leave, the woman officer reminds my parents that homeschooling requires proper documentation and regular assessment, and they should make sure everything is filed correctly. Mom thanks them for their concern, and Dad walks them to the door. As soon as the police car pulls away, the fake smiles disappear. Dad tells me to sit back down, and I do. He sits across from me, and his voice is very calm and very quiet when he speaks. He says if I ever try to manipulate authorities again, they'll have no choice but to take more extreme measures for my own safety. He doesn't raise his voice once, but the threat is so clear I feel cold all over. Mom stands behind him with her arms crossed and nods along. Dad says they're trying to protect me, and I'm making it very difficult by acting out and trying to get outside help when there's nothing wrong. He says the move to the rural property is more important than ever now, and will be leaving as soon as the paperwork goes through. I'm sent back to my room and I lie on my bed feeling like I just failed some huge test I didn't know I was taking. 2 days pass with barely any interaction beyond meals delivered to my room. Then on the third day, there's a knock at the front door mid-morning when no one is expected. I hear Dad answer and a woman's voice I don't recognize. She says she's Aisha Beckwith from Child Protective Services, and she needs to speak with the family. I hear the shock in Dad's voice even though he tries to hide it. Mom comes out of the kitchen and there's this long pause before Dad invites the woman inside. I crack my bedroom door open and peek down the stairs. Aisha is a black woman maybe in her 40s wearing business clothes and carrying a folder. She's looking around at the foam padding on the walls and the tape over the doorbell button and the earplugs we're all wearing. Her face stays professional, but I can tell she's taking in every detail. She asks to speak with me privately, and Dad says that's not necessary. But Aisha explains it's required as part of the investigation. Mom's face goes tight, but she agrees. Dad calls up the stairs for me and I come down. Aisha introduces herself and asks where we can talk alone, and I lead her to my room. She closes the door behind us, and the click of it shutting feels like the most important sound I've ever heard. She sits on my desk chair, and I sit on my bed, and she asks me to tell her what's been going on. I show her the new hiding spot where I've been keeping scraps of paper with dates and events written on them. I tell her about the hammer in my phone 2 years ago, about Mom dragging me home by my hair from the church, about the locks on my door and the isolation and the planned move to the middle of nowhere. She listens without interrupting and writes things down in a notebook. When I finish, she asks if she can take photos, and I nod. She photographs my room and the lock on the outside of my door, and the foam padding Mom put over the wall. She asks me to roll up my sleeves and takes pictures of the bruises on my arms that are still fading from where Mom grabbed me. They're yellowish now, but still visible. Aisha tells me she's creating something called a safety plan that my parents will have to follow. No physical restraints. Required outdoor time every day. Scheduled follow-up visits from CPS. She says this is not optional and my parents have to agree or there will be consequences. We go back downstairs and Aisha sits my parents down at the kitchen table and explains the safety plan. Dad's face is completely blank, and Mom's mouth is pressed into a thin line, but they both nod and agree to everything. Aisha says she'll be back in 1 week to check on compliance and she gives them paperwork to sign. After she leaves, there's this horrible silence in the house. Then Mom goes to the kitchen and starts making dinner like nothing happened. Dad goes to his office. But I can feel the change in the air. That night after dinner, Dad comes to my room and tells me I'm required to spend 30 minutes outside every day per the safety plan. The next morning, Mom follows me to the back door and watches through the window the entire time I'm in the yard. When I come back inside, she searches my pockets and my room. That evening, Dad goes through my things again while I sit on my bed. They're following every rule Aisha set, but they've found new ways to control me. Mom speaks to me only in short clipped sentences giving instructions. Dad monitors my outdoor time from the window with his arms crossed. My room gets searched twice a day. The locks stay off my door, but I know they're watching and listening more carefully than ever. I'm technically safer according to the safety plan, but I feel more trapped than before, because now I know they're just performing compliance while finding every loophole they can. The next morning, during my required outdoor time, I walk slowly around the yard while Dad watches from the kitchen window. I make my way toward the back fence where the Wong's property meets ours and pretend to examine Mom's dead tomato plants. Andre appears on his side of the fence and crouches down like he's pulling weeds. He speaks quietly without looking at me directly. He tells me there's a youth shelter downtown that takes emergency placements, no questions asked, and they have beds available. He pulls a small folded flyer from his pocket and slides it under the fence gap. I palm it quickly and shove it in my sock before Dad can see. Andre says his mom knows a caseworker there and they're expecting situations like mine. The flyer has a phone number printed in big letters and I stare at it for 10 seconds, burning the digits into my memory. 720-415-8863. I repeat it in my head over and over. Dad taps on the window and points at his watch, so I know my time is almost up. I nod at Andre and walk back toward the house. And once I'm in the bathroom, I tear the flyer into tiny pieces and flush it down the toilet. I spend the rest of the day in my room repeating that phone number like a prayer. 720-415-8863. I think about what I'd need to say to get them to take me. I think about whether I could actually do this, actually leave. The hardest part is Micah. Every time I imagine walking out that door, I see his face in my mind and feel sick. He's 7 years old and he has nightmares about music because of what they've done to him. If I leave, he'll be alone with them and their crazy ideas and their control. Miles is older and he believes everything they say, but Micah is still little enough that maybe he could be different if he had a chance. But I also know I can't save him if I can't save myself first. I'm 16, and I'm losing my mind in this house, and if I don't get out soon, I don't know what will happen to me. The guilt sits in my stomach like a rock, but so does the need to escape. I try to figure out how to do both, and I can't. There's no version where I take Micah with me because I have no money and no plan and no way to take care of a 7-year-old. I hate myself for even thinking about leaving him, but I also know I have to. That evening at dinner, Dad makes an announcement. He says he talked to the property owner and we're moving in 3 days instead of 2 weeks. He looks right at me when he says it, and I know this is because of the safety plan, because they want to get me away from Aisha and her rules before she comes back. Mom nods and says we need to start packing tonight. I ask if CPS said this was okay, and Dad's face goes hard. He says the safety plan doesn't prevent us from moving to a better environment, and Aisha will be notified of our new address. I realize my window just got way smaller. 3 days. I have 3 days to decide if I'm actually going to do this. After dinner, I go to my room and sit on my bed and try to breathe normally. Mom comes in an hour later with boxes and tells me to start packing my clothes. I pack slowly, buying time, thinking. That night, after everyone is asleep, I get up and find a pen and paper I hid in my closet. I sit on my floor in the dark and write a letter to Micah. I tell him I love him and I'm not abandoning him. I tell him I can't stay here and let them destroy me, but that doesn't mean I don't care about him. I tell him the nightmares aren't real and music isn't poison, and someday when he's older, he'll understand. I tell him I'll try to come back for him when I can. I fold the letter small and creep down the hall to his room. His door is open a crack and I can hear his breathing. I slip inside and hide the letter under his pillow where he'll find it after I'm gone. Writing it made me cry for the first time since the basement incident, and the tears are still wet on my face when I get back to my room. The next 2 days are awful. I pack my things while planning my escape. I hide my important stuff at the bottom of a box where I can grab it fast. I memorize the shelter number over and over. 720-415-8863. I watch the clock and count down hours. Mom and Dad are busy with moving logistics, and I use their distraction to prepare. On the night before moving day, I lie in bed fully clothed and wait. I wait until I hear Dad snoring from their room and Mom's even breathing, and the house goes completely quiet. Then I get up and grab the butter knife I stole from dinner. The bolt on my door is simple, just a slide lock on the outside, and I work the knife blade into the crack between door and frame. I push and wiggle and try to catch the bolt edge. It takes forever. My hands shake and sweat and the knife keeps slipping. I have to stop twice when I hear sounds from other rooms. After 40 minutes of patient, quiet effort, I finally feel the bolt slide. The door opens and I stand there in the dark hallway breathing hard. I grab my bag from where I hid it behind my dresser and creep toward the stairs. Every step sounds too loud. I make it halfway down and then I see Dad in the kitchen. He's standing by the sink getting water and we lock eyes across the dark house. For 1 second, neither of us moves. Then he starts toward me and I run. I run for the front door and he's yelling and I'm yelling and suddenly Mom is coming down the stairs behind me. I get the door open and run outside screaming. Help me, someone help me. I scream it over and over. Dad grabs my arm and I wrench away and keep screaming. Lights come on at the Wong's house and I see Sylvia in her window with her phone. Dad tries to pull me back inside but I fight him and scream louder. Help me, please, someone help me. Within minutes I hear sirens. Red and blue lights fill the street and 2 police cars pull up. The officers get out and Dad lets go of my arm. Mom is on the porch looking wild and scared. One officer asks what's going on, and I tell them everything. I tell them about the locks and the isolation and the planned move to trap me in the middle of nowhere. I tell them I'm scared and I need help and I can't go with them. My parents stand there silent and angry while I talk. The officers look at each other and then at me and then at my parents. They ask my parents questions and Dad tries to explain about the safety plan, but his voice sounds wrong. One officer talks into his radio and then tells me they're taking me into protective custody for my immediate safety. I'm shaking so hard I can barely walk. They help me to the police car and I look back once at the house. Micah's face is in his bedroom window. He's pressed against the glass watching and my heart breaks. But I also feel relief flooding through me because I'm finally getting out. They take me to a youth emergency shelter on the other side of town. It's a plain brick building with bright lights inside. A woman named Hattie meets us at the door and talks to the officers while I stand there shaking. She has kind eyes and a calm voice. She brings me inside to a small office and does intake paperwork, asking questions about my name and age and medical stuff. I answer everything in a flat voice because I'm too tired to feel anything anymore. When the paperwork is done, Hattie shows me to a small room with a bed and a dresser and a window. She points to the lock on the inside of the door and tells me I control it, nobody else. She asks if I need anything and I shake my head. After she leaves, I lock the door and lie down on the bed, still wearing my clothes and shoes. I sleep for 12 hours straight. It's the first real rest I've had in weeks. When I wake up, it's afternoon and sun is coming through the window, and for a few seconds I forget where I am. Then I remember, and I lie there feeling strange and empty and safe all at the same time. Someone knocks on my door and I unlock it. Hattie tells me I have a visitor and brings me to a quiet room with 2 chairs and a table. Aisha is sitting there with her notebook. She stands up when I come in and asks how I'm doing. I sit down and tell her I'm okay. She says we need to do a full interview and she's going to record everything. I nod and she starts the recorder. I tell her about the ideology and how my parents believe music destroys brains. I tell her about the hammer in my phone 2 years ago. I tell her about Mom dragging me by my hair from the church. I tell her about the locks on my door and being homeschooled to keep me isolated. I tell her about the basement incident with the MP3 player and everything that happened after. I tell her about the safety plan and how they followed the rules but made everything worse. I tell her about the planned move and how I knew it was my last chance to get out. Aisha writes it all down and records it all. And when I finish, she tells me I'm safe now. She says my parents can't take me back and I'll stay at the shelter while they figure out next steps. I want to believe her, but part of me is still waiting for my parents to somehow show up and drag me back. 3 days later, Hattie drives me to the courthouse for an emergency hearing, and I sit in a waiting room with plastic chairs while she goes over what will happen. A judge reviews Aisha's report and the police documentation and the photos she took of my room and the locks. The hearing takes less than an hour, but it feels like forever sitting there picking at my cuticles and watching people walk past in suits. When Hattie comes out, she tells me the judge granted a temporary protective order, which means my parents can only contact me through supervised visits arranged by CPS. She sits down next to me and explains this is just the beginning of a process with more hearings to come, but at least I have legal protection now. I nod and try to feel relieved, but mostly I just feel tired. The next week, Hattie helps me enroll in the local public high school, and I'm terrified of being so far behind after years of homeschooling. We meet with a counselor named Miss Verma who has kind eyes and doesn't ask too many questions about why I'm coming from a shelter. She sets up a plan for catching up with extra tutoring in math and science, and says I can start classes the following Monday. Hattie also arranges for me to see a therapist twice a week at a clinic near the shelter. The therapist specializes in trauma and control-based abuse according to the intake paperwork I fill out. Her office has soft chairs and plants on the windowsill, and she tells me we'll work on coping strategies at my own pace. A few days after that, I check the email account Hattie set up for me with supervision filters, and there's a message from Andre. Reading it makes my chest feel tight in a good way because it's from someone who knows what I went through. He says his family was worried about me after that night, and they're glad I'm safe now. He tells me about school and how his band is practicing for a spring concert, and asks if I'm doing okay. Knowing I had allies even when everything was falling apart makes me feel less alone than I have in months. I write back a short message thanking him and telling him I'm at a shelter and starting school soon. Aisha comes by the shelter to give me updates about my brothers, and I sit in the common room while she goes through her notes. She did welfare checks at the house and at their schools. Micah has been referred for therapy for his anxiety, and his teacher says he seems less jumpy in class. Miles is resistant to outside help, and gets defensive when his counselor tries to talk to him, but his teachers note he's engaging more at the school without the constant reinforcement of my parents' ideology at home. Hearing about Micah getting help makes me feel a little better about leaving, but I still worry about both of them stuck in that house. Aisha tells me my parents are required to attend counseling as part of keeping custody of my brothers. The therapist's report notes that Mom shows signs of severe anxiety disorder, and Dad exhibits rigid thinking patterns. They're attending the sessions, but the therapist notes limited insight so far, which means they're showing up, but not really changing. I ask if they're still playing music next door, and Aisha says the neighbors haven't reported any more confrontations. 3 weeks after the emergency hearing, there's a full court hearing where I have to testify about what happened. Hattie comes with me, and we sit outside the courtroom until they call me in. Walking up to the witness stand makes my legs shake, and my voice comes out quiet when I answer questions. The lawyer asks me about the ideology and the isolation, and the basement incident and the planned move. I tell the truth in an official setting, and it's terrifying but also empowering to finally say it all out loud where it matters. My parents sit at a table with their lawyer and don't look at me the whole time. The judge listens to everything, and then extends the protective order, and mandates continued monitoring of my brother's situation, with specific conditions my parents must meet. After the hearing, Hattie arranges for me to attend a small community concert, as part of exposure therapy for my music anxiety. The therapist thinks it will help me process my complicated feelings about music in a safe environment. We go on a Saturday afternoon to a park where a local band is playing folk music. I sit on a blanket with Hattie nearby, and the first song makes me start crying immediately. It's not sad crying exactly, but more like everything I've been holding in is pouring out through my eyes. I spend the whole time crying but also feeling more alive than I have in years. People around us probably think I'm weird, but Hattie just sits there and lets me have whatever reaction I need to have. Later in therapy, I process the complex emotions of grief and joy mixed together. The therapist helps me understand that I can love music and also grieve what my parents' fear of it cost my family. At the school, I'm struggling with some subjects, especially math, where I'm behind on basic concepts. Science is hard too because I never learned proper lab procedures or the scientific method. But I'm doing better than expected in English and history, where reading comprehension helps me catch up faster. I passed my first set of quizzes in 3 classes, and the small victory feels huge. My English teacher writes, "Great work," on my essay about a book we read, and I stare at those words for a long time. I'm starting to believe I can actually catch up and have a normal educational experience, even though it's going to take a lot of work. A month after I left home, Aisha comes by with an update about my parents' therapy progress. She sits down with me in the counseling room at the shelter and tells me they had their first breakthrough. Mom admitted that her fear of music stems from her own anxiety disorder, not from any real danger. Dad acknowledged that isolating the family may have caused harm, especially to me and my brothers. It's a tiny shift in their thinking, but it's something. Aisha says the therapist is cautiously optimistic, but notes they have a long way to go. I don't know how to feel about this because part of me wants them to get better, and part of me is still angry about everything they put us through. The therapist says both feelings can be true at the same time. 2 days later, I have my first supervised visit with my brothers at a CPS office. We sit in a room with toys and books while a social worker stays in the corner taking notes. Micah runs up and hugs me as soon as I walk in and tells me he's sleeping better now. His nightmares are less frequent since he started therapy, and since the house is calmer without me and my parents fighting. Miles sits in a chair and doesn't say much at first. He looks uncomfortable and keeps glancing at the social worker. Finally, he admits he's not sure about everything anymore. I can tell the separation from constant parental messaging is affecting him. He asks if I'm coming home, and I tell him I don't know. Micah shows me a drawing he made in therapy of our family with everyone smiling, and I have to swallow hard to keep from crying again. 2 weeks later, Hattie sits me down in her office at the shelter and tells me they found a host family who wants to meet me. She shows me a file with photos of a small house with a front porch and a couple in their 50s who look normal and kind. They don't have other kids and they've done foster placements before, and Hattie says they understand my situation and want to help. The meeting happens at a neutral location, a community center with a quiet room, and I'm so nervous I can barely speak at first. The woman's name is Carol and the man is Robert, and they ask me basic questions about school and what I like to do. Carol mentions they have a spare bedroom that would be mine, and Robert says they keep a quiet house, but I'm welcome to listen to music whenever I want. That sentence makes me start crying again, and Carol hands me tissues without making a big deal about it. They tell me there's no pressure and I can think about it. But something about them feels safe and I nod yes before I can overthink it. The transition happens over the next week with Hattie helping me move my few belongings to their house. My room has a bed, a desk, a small bookshelf, and a door that locks from the inside, which Carol points out specifically, so I know I have privacy and control. In therapy twice a week, I work through accepting that my family situation is messy and might never be fully fixed. The therapist helps me understand that I can grieve what I lost while still moving forward with my own life. Some days I'm angry at my parents, and some days I miss them, and both feelings exist at the same time. I'm committed to finishing school even though catching up is hard, and I'm starting to imagine a future that's more than just surviving day to day. 6 months after that night in the basement, I'm living with Carol and Robert, and doing well enough in the school that I might graduate only 1 year behind. My parents are still in therapy with supervised contact only, and the reports say they're making slow progress, but it's going to take years. My brothers are getting support while staying at home with strict CPS oversight, and Micah's nightmares have mostly stopped. The Wongs check in on me sometimes through messages, and it means a lot that they noticed and acted when it mattered most. I still have hard days when the grief hits, or when I worry about my brothers, and therapy is ongoing because trauma doesn't just disappear. But I'm safe and I'm learning, and I can listen to music whenever I want, and that's a better ending than I ever thought possible back when my only act of rebellion was turning up the volume. Well, that is the big finale. If you made it to the end, I am equally impressed and concerned. You might as well subscribe now, because at this point we are both in too deep. Let's see where it goes next time.